We are live. Hi, everybody. Welcome to A Mighty Blaze. I'm Julie Gerstenblatt, author of Daughters of Nantucket, and I'm here today with author Lori Gold to talk about her new novel. Let's hold it up, Lori. Romantic Friction. First, I'll just introduce Lori, and then we'll get into the questions. And we're happy to have you here. And you should start thinking about your questions. We'll ask them later on in the show, and we'll get everybody chatting. So, Lori is the author of 1 adult historical and 4 novels for young adults, all under Lori Goldstein. She currently lives outside of Boston, where she fosters a writing community through her creative writing classes, book coaching, and writing retreats, which we're totally going to talk about. Romantic Friction is one of Zibby Media's most anticipated books of 2025. Congrats on that. It's a humorous caper of writer rivalry and AI shenanigans at a romance readers convention where ambition, friendship, and artistic integrity collide. It is hilarious. It is very insidery if you like reading about authors and their lives, and it's about success and that especially like female friendship and ambition and how the two can collide. So welcome, Lori.
Thank you, Julie. This is so great to be here with you, my fellow HarperCollins imprint author.
Yeah, I know. That's how we actually sort of first met, when a friend in the biz introduced us. And it's fun to be here with you to talk about this book, which I really loved, and I have so much. First of all, were you laughing yourself? Did you like crack yourself up while writing? Is that a question? My first question is, were you laughing while you were writing this?
Absolutely, I was. And I just hope other people laugh, because when you laugh when you're writing, like, you don't know if it's your own wacky sense of humor or if other people are going to find it funny. So yes, if my goal is to make myself laugh and then make the readers laugh.
Awesome. Goal achieved. So why don't you tell everybody a little bit more than what I did in that intro about the book and how you came up with the idea?
Sure. So the book Romantic Friction is about a best-selling romantasy author named Sophie Wilde. And Sophie is at the height of her career when she discovers that another author has used AI to write in her style. And instead of being canceled, as we might expect, readers embrace it. And the AI author is called innovative in the press, and she's trending on social media, and Sophie is livid. So when Sophie arrives at the largest romance readers convention in the country and discovers that the AI author has also been invited, she bands together with her fellow authors to take the AI author down any way they can, which will include committing a felony.
yeah, possible, felony. It's so, it goes like off the rails, but like in the best way possible. And she knows that. Like, Sophie Wilde, first of all, then her name is perfect. Wilde with an E, but it fits her so well, because she really is sort of buttoned up, and she is very much a lone wolf in the industry too. She doesn't work with others. She doesn't support or isn't a part of writing community.
Yeah.
But at this convention, it's so, if you've ever been to any work convention, but in particular romance writing conventions, you're going to get like so much love and so much fandom and so many authors who are kind of all together hanging out.
Yeah.
And it made me miss, I'm not going to the Historical Novel Society conference this year because I'm not presenting, but I almost want to go just to hang out with the other authors.
Yeah.
And Sophie is totally not like that.
Right.
So tell us a little bit about your experiences in the publishing industry and in maybe conventions or author events in particular, and like what informed this for you, and where are you compared to your main character?
Yeah. So Sophie is a romantasy author, which I am not a romantasy author or a romance author. But for exactly the reasons you said, I wanted to set her in that world because as people who are readers know, romance readers are loyal and they're ravenous readers, and they read everything that their favorite authors write. So I thought, what better genre for Sophie to write in than this genre where you expect your fans are always going to be behind you, because it's higher stakes if they're not. So from a craft perspective, that's why I chose romance and romantasy as the genre that Sophie writes in. But, you know, when I was coming up with where to set this, because it could have been set anywhere, and I decided to bring everybody together at this convention. And that's partly informed from my own years. I started as a young adult author, as you mentioned, Julie. And in the beginning, it was way pre-pandemic. My first book came out in 2015. There were, and I don't know if there are as many, but there were these really huge reader conventions for young adults. I mean, I did a couple in Texas where they would bus in kids from schools, and you would have 5,000 teenagers coming to a book festival. It was amazing and wild. And that was my first year as a debut author. And I got to meet writers at every level, from the top best-selling authors in the genre to authors like me who are just starting out. And there was just so much that went on behind the scenes of those kinds of conventions or reader events, meeting with fans, meeting with other authors, all the stuff that you can learn that informed romantic fiction of the inside publishing. So I brought kind of all of those experience going to author events, and especially like bigger events that are these day-long or multi-day festivals, into the novel.
Awesome. And like you said, Sophie is, she's like a best-selling author. She's at the top of her game. She has a lot to lose at that point, as, compared to, let's say, when you were first at your first convention and, anything, everything is good and you can only go up from where you are as a debut in an industry where maybe nobody knows you yet. But Sophie has to like hang on tight. Like there were a lot of moments where it's like, it's just a struggle at the top, and everybody's sort of like aiming for her or in some way. And because she doesn't have this community, she doesn't have fans within the author world either.
Yeah.
So talk about a little bit about like the new, talk about Hartley West and her role in this, and how you created the one who wants to become the new Sophie Wilde, and who uses AI to get fame.
Well, a little fun Easter egg before I talk about Hartley. Hartley West is actually the name of one of my best friends. And she said to me one time before this book, maybe the book before, she said, "You've never used my name as a character in one of your books." And she said, "Hartley West is like the best character name. How could you not use it?" So I wrote this whole book and inserted Hartley West as the AI author. And as it was going on, at first, all I could think of was my friend Hartley. But slowly she became her own persona, and she doesn't really share traits with my friend Hartley at all. But she became Hartley West in the book, and I became attached to changing it. When the book sold and was going to come out, it was my husband who said, "Did you ever tell Hartley she's like the villain in your book?" And I didn't. So I finally reached out to her and I said, "Listen, the book sold. This is who you are." I was with the summary. And she's like, "And I'm the villain?" And I said, "Yes." She's like, "Great."
That's good.
Yeah. So she was okay with that. But this book is an inside publishing story, in addition to being about the use of AI in the creative space. And I wanted to show the different perspectives. I wanted to show both Sophie, as you said, at the height of her game. And I wanted to show people kind of in the middle. And I wanted to show Hartley, who struggled to get an agent and get a publishing deal. And she felt extremely frustrated. And she goes to use AI to kind of write her novel instead of writing it herself. So I wanted to show that also kind of, every level of being an author. And that was kind of how I informed Hartley, like someone who really wanted to break out as an author and was struggling.
Got it. And I felt like I could understand both of their points of view, especially the more you get to know Hartley, which, by the way, it is the perfect name for her because it sounds almost made up. It sounds like a stage name or a pen name. And then when it's used to show the battle between them, like Sophie Wilde and Hartley West, so it's like the Wild West.
Exactly.
Like, hashtags abound and go crazy.
Right.
And so my friend Trisha, our friend from Mighty Blaze, is saying she knows those struggles. It takes a long time to find an agent. You can be told your book is great, your writing is wonderful. You can have a lot of close calls where there's a lot of warmth and attention given to your writing, but just not enough to get you that deal.
Right.
So how do you keep writing through that? So thinking about Hartley's plan and idea, it's really kind of ingenious, and it really does make for fun page turning stuff. I just want to talk about some of the side characters, because this is maybe where you have the most fun everywhere, but you have a lot of fun with the other authors, like the idea of Tara Cara, which is two authors who write together as one. And I can think of several off the top of my head. You know, if you're out there and you know Liv Constantine, if you know Ali Brady, you know that these are friends collaborating as one author. And so that was super fun.
Yeah.
And
And
just
it's a loving nod to those authors. It's
yeah,
I
yeah,
play with it just because the name they came up with, Tara Cara, is
yeah,
just kind of silly, and but it is a loving nod to all those co-authors who write
yeah, yeah, because and especially that really shows like that contrast between someone like Sophie West, who doesn't write with anybody, not even like showing like writing community. You don't have to write with someone to have a writing community, but the idea of people who really bounce ideas off each other and support one another, whether that's like you're a co-author or not.
together.
So I thought that was really great and fun. And I like the idea that they're so good at plotting and then you can like use them in other ways too. Do you have a favorite secondary character or someone you want to tell us about?
You know, so the side characters are, the book is a little bit, it's a satire. It gets extreme,
Yeah.
and that's purposeful. It's a romp. It's like a little bit campy, not totally, but it goes there a little bit. And one review called it unhinged in the best way, and I love that because it's exactly what I was going for. So the other characters of Fiona and Grace, Fiona especially, is just silly. And I use her somewhat for comic relief, but also to represent, an angle of the author who had immediate success and didn't have to grow and didn't have to pull herself up like Sophie did and try all these things. Fiona just gets it right away. And there are many authors who on their debut book
Yeah.
break out. So she is that perspective from authordom. But I really just felt like she was fun. She dresses up in the costumes of like the covers of her book at these conventions with the wigs and the whole dress and the whole thing. And it was just a way to kind of give even more like lightness to the book. And she was just so much fun to write because I feel like I could put anything in her mouth and make her do or say anything, and it worked for her character. So I have to say she was really fun when I brought her on the page.
Awesome. Tell us a little bit about the male character. There's sort of, because the book is called Romantic Friction, it sounds like romantic fiction and you think maybe it's a romance itself.
Right.
That is secondary to this story of female friendship, rivalry, writing competition, etc.
Right.
But it is there and it's layered. And so tell us a little bit about but he has two names, Cooper Brad. Is that
Yes,
right?
yes, that is correct. When I talk about this book and HarperCollins publishing this book, I give them a lot of credit because it is very inside baseball of publishing, and they didn't make me change anything. And we can talk about that. But the idea that they let me do some of the wacky things I do in this book, like call a character Cooper Brad for like 3/4 of the book, and if you read it, you'll understand why. But it was just so fun to create a character who would be a romantic interest for Sophie, because Sophie is a loner and she says she's abandoned everything else in her life for her author career: family, friendships, romance. And so if you have a character like that, I had to figure out, well, who is it? I wanted a slight romance. It's light in there, but it's there. It only takes place over a few days, so you can't have anything too much going on there. But I wanted a character that would be an intriguing counterpart to Sophie. And who would Sophie actually start to maybe have almost even reluctant feelings for? And so figuring out who Cooper Brad was that for her, even though he hasn't had success in the writing world and he wants to have that success, he is very intellectually on the same level as Sophie. And he jokes with her and he's goofy with her at times, but then he starts to, as the book goes on, challenge her on a more intellectual level of, what are you doing here, Sophie? And how far are you willing to go? And I felt like that would be the kind of man that Sophie could gravitate towards, even if it was against her instincts to want to do that. So I had to create somebody who would be at that level for her, but also fit into the kind of the fun of the book.
Yeah, he is a good, I don't know if it's a foil but a good, back and forth for her, good banter and all of that.
Right.
I love also the t-shirts that everybody wears, and the chapter headings are tied into sort of the craft of writing.
Right.
And the idea of something that the ending should be surprising but inevitable. And so it's very meta because then you do that yourself. So you're making fun of the craft, but honoring the sort of the best tropey bits and like hitting all of those points so that we get the satisfying
Right.
story as well.
Yeah.
So I have to ask you, because one of the things you play off of is the plotter versus pantser. And Sophie says, I think she's a plantser, somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
And so where do you fit on that?
I am now getting to the stage where I feel like I'm slightly more of a plantser than a pure plotter. But when I started out, the very first book I wrote back in 2013, when I moved into creative writing, which I'd never taken a creative writing course before in my life, not in high school, not college, nothing.
Wow.
I did journalism and some tech editing. And then I kind of decided, oh, I'm going to write a book. So yeah, right. So 3 years later, and a draft that, I'm not kidding you, at the end was 250,000 words for a woman's contemporary novel, which for those who don't know, word count is like 600 to 700 pages. It's like Game of Thrones like level. I realized I needed to know what I was doing, and I took a couple of classes including at Grub Street where I teach, and it kind of transformed my life. It was a novel planning course, and the instructor walked through how you put a novel together and how you plan a novel. And I was a strict adherent of that. My first published book, Becoming Gin, had an 80-page outline, scene by scene outline for the book. And it was so helpful for me because I was starting out, I didn't know really what I was doing. And I really stuck to figuring out, what is this formula behind writing books, which there is a formula behind writing books. There is something you can learn, which I think a lot of writers don't understand or haven't been exposed to. It's not all muse. There's things you do in a book. And so my first couple of books were very much along that heavy plotting. I spent a lot of time thinking about plot points. I would do these scene by scene outlines. But the thing that happens as you go along, you learn more and you get more comfortable with yourself and you understand how story works. So by the time I hit this book, which is my 6th published book, but I just went through this yesterday when I was leading a session on writing, I believe it's my 11th written book, and my 6th published book. So by the time I got to this one, and weirdly, the book that's going to come out next year, I wrote before this one. So like we're a little bit backwards on that. But I felt like I knew the major plot points. I knew the twist at the end, which I think is very important for writers to know. And if there are any writers watching, knowing what is going to happen at the end, I think is vital. So I knew some major plot points. I knew the ending. And then I took it as like a chunk at a time, almost like 30 pages at a time, and then another 30. And I kind of like plotted it out. There's a book called Story Genius that almost recommends doing your writing that way, of like, plot 5 scenes, write 5 scenes, plot 5 scenes, write 5 scenes. And that's more what I did with this one.
Okay. A question I had for later was like, what writing book would you recommend? So it's Story Genius would be one?
I think it depends. So I feel like it's good to expose yourself to a lot of different books to figure out, what kind of writer am I, especially when you're just starting out, because Story Genius is great for people who want to do that kind of like plot and write at the same time. Mm-hmm. If you can't hold yourself back from writing with the time it takes to plot, this allows you to do both. It's very character focused. So if you feel like that you want to lead with character, I think Story Genius is very good. It can get a little dense. For some people I've recommended it to, said it's a little almost too academic for them. So I always put that out there because you have to find the ones that, work for you. The very plot focused one would be going back to like Save the Cat. And that is very much more, it doesn't exclude character, but it's very much focused on story beats and pacing. So if you feel like I nailed the character, but I'm having trouble with pacing and plotting, then I push people to like Save the Cat.
Yeah, I love Save the Cat. I'm a big fan of it, and I use it for all of my writing. I'd never heard of Story Genius or use Story Genius, so I'm going to go get that and look at that and compare. Yeah. And I can see where together they would really, kind of augment or complement each other.
Yes.
Tell us about, you sound like a teacher.
Yes.
You are a writing teacher. And so I want to talk a little bit about that part of your life too, because side note, everybody, I led my first retreat this year on Nantucket for 20 writers, and Lori was in her second year doing a retreat on the Cape and was so helpful to me
I'm
in planning that. So shout out to Lori for that,
glad.
like sharing notes and really helpful. But talk about, so I know that you teach a workshop and that you have this retreat. Tell us more about your teaching. And if you also workshop your stuff,
Mhm.
whether, with this group or a different group and all that.
Right. Great. Yeah. So I started teaching for Grub Street in Boston when my first book came out in 2015. And I, at that point, was doing what I felt comfortable with, which was very much novel planning classes, because that's what I did. And that's what I felt comfortable with. As the years have gone on, I've leading more workshopping, and I lead classes through Grub Street as well as through my own kind of brand, which is called Think Right. And that's under which I do my writing retreats as well. But as time went on and I wanted to expand to do more things, I lead some like 9-month mentorship programs with writers. So we start out going through the components of what a novel is, and then we transition into them workshopping pages, and we stay together for a long time, very small group. And I've been with a couple of groups in that capacity for a couple of years now. And then I also lead some classes, I call it AAA. Accountability, advice, and accomplices, because I think these are the biggest things that writers need. So accountability, you have to show up. You have to show up for your writing. Advice, we meet once a week and people get advice from me on where they are and where they're stuck. And then accomplices, you need a community of people to do this with. And it was right out of those classes where I kept hearing from my students, and they were kind of separate classes, that they really wanted to get know more writers and develop this community. And that's where the idea for me for the writing retreat was born. I wanted to bring more than just 4 people together at a time. And so that's when I started doing the writing retreats. And I just kind of almost crowdsourced the people I knew well to say, what do you want out of this retreat? Do you want it to be very craft focused in terms of lessons? Do you want it to be just generative focused? And started to gather information to say, what do they want? What does this community want? And what came out of it was most people wanting time to write, time to come together, sit in a big room together and write. And then in the evenings, we chat and we socialize and we do some salon readings. And it's a very kind of, nice, informal, casual way to do a weekend of writing. And people really gravitated towards it and loved it. And so did I. Like, being in this community of writers in person, especially post-pandemic, has been a really kind of special thing to do. So I really kind of enjoy doing that.
It sounds awesome. And having read through all of the workshops that you do, they look great. And then in terms of do you workshop your stuff as you're writing it? And what's your writing community look like for you, that side?
Yeah, my best, we start off calling somebody a writing friend and then they just become friends, as you well know. But so my best writing friends, we started together back in 2013 and 2015, and we're still in touch now. We were part of a debut group there, and we're still kind of doing it. And some are still writing and some aren't. Some are very successful, some are mid-list, like I call myself. But those are my group. And I would say I go down to basically 2 of them. And I don't so much workshop as brainstorm. So at this point, I kind of feel like I come up with the premise and I give a little pitch paragraph, like what I led this off with, and I run it by them. And then we kind of together think about the story. Oh, include this, include that. What if I did this? What if I did that? And there's a period where it's just kind of simply brainstorming together of what, could happen in this book. And then I kind of stop and I go off and I kind of write it. And if I reach a place where I feel like I'm stuck, I go back to those people who know the story and we talk about it and we kind of keep going. I don't so much workshop pages until the whole manuscript is done. I don't feel it's good for my process. And I think, again, these are the things writers have to figure out, and you only figure it out by doing it. So do it, find out what you like. Some people like to workshop chapter by chapter. I discovered that's not productive for me. And every way you want to write and workshop is fine. But for me personally, I found like I'm better having the full manuscript done, having it revised to the level I think it's, in a really good spot. And then I put it out to my 2 critique partners for workshopping and get feedback on the manuscript as a whole.
Okay. So how long does it take you to get to, like, let's meet, with every book, maybe it's different, but for romantic fiction, how long did it take you to write it before sharing it?
I'm a pretty fast writer when I focus. I write and I teach, and I'm fortunate enough those are the things I do. So I don't have a day job. It would take much longer to write if I had like a day job. So I'm fortunate in that circumstance. So I can usually write my first draft in about 3 to 4 months. And then before I would give it to somebody, I'd probably spend another 2. So I would say it's like a 6-month process before I would hand the pages over to anybody else. The only person that's the exception is I do make my husband read things at times.
I was wondering about that. I'm like, do you have just like maybe, like a more...
He's my gut check, and I can force him to read it, kind of in between stages.
Well, yeah, I have my husband and my mom read early pages. And then I was asking about workshopping because A Mighty Blaze's community really are mostly my workshop and critique partners.
Mhm.
And Jenna, what is my writing teacher to this day, and the person who's producing this segment, Jenna Blum, and she's writing about writers too. And so with her book, Murder Your Darlings, comes out in January.
Great
And
title.
and it's a insidery, but like killer insidery, like don't get too close
Yeah.
to the guy who wants your story, maybe. But no, you did not. But it's really important to me to have a writing community, and I thank them, and I thank them publicly right this minute. But also I thank them for keeping me on track and keeping me in it and feel like connected to my own story and process, and not overwhelmed, but like excited about the work. So
Yeah.
I do encourage people to have community, whether that's like you said, after you've sort of written as much and as best as you can, or brainstorming at the beginning. Oh, and thanks, Jenna. Yeah, we're excited. I'm excited too. And we'll be workshopping book 3 with you at some point. And yeah, and we did continue, starting the Mighty Blaze was really in response to not having that community during the pandemic. And Blaze did come from the workshop, as they're saying. So now I think we need to talk a little bit about AI, because that piece, is huge in the book, and it's huge. It's a major talking point and we're at an inflection point right now with that
Yeah.
in everything, in many industries. So I had a quote about it from the book that you say, we must control. It's about whether, authors, what should authors do? And here's just something one of the authors in the book says: we must control the direction. Everything that happens now is under scrutiny to see if this is a footnote to history or becomes actual history. So tell me, like, what is your experience with AI? What do you feel about it?
Yeah.
And let's just get into it.
So I have such mixed feelings about it, because personally I'm anxious and terrified about what it means for arts, not just writing, but kind of all of art and entertainment to come. We're in such, as you said, this technology is developing and changing every day and getting better and better. And what is that going to mean for the arts specifically? Let's get down to publishing. What is it going to mean for writers going forward? And, I feel like, so in terms of where it is, when I first started writing this book, I would plug things in just to test it and see, could it come up with plot points? Could it come up with scenes? And it was not good enough. They were not there. So I did it actually just before the book released a week ago, and plugged some things in of plot points from the romantic fiction, and asked it to write the first chapter. And it was short. It was surface level. There was much more to flesh out. But what scared me more than anything, and I almost hate saying this because I don't want to encourage writers to use it, but it had a voice for the character.
Oh.
And, but I did put in my full synopsis, and not just the pitch that I gave at the start. I put in like a 5-page synopsis. So it had more going on. It knew more what the plot was going to be. But I was surprised that it had advanced in just, 2 years or a year and a half to the point where it was. And it really made me scared for what writing is going forward. And the question is, I think so many writers, I even had a couple of reviewers say they weren't going to read the book because they didn't want to read anything that supported AI. And they said that without even knowing, what the book was about, where it goes. So that's fine. But I think a lot of us in the writing world are very much afraid and very much anti-AI. And it worries me because I don't know if the rest of the world feels that way. And I know so many people who are using it in their jobs to craft better emails, to fix their essays. My friends' kids are in high school are using it for homework. I think so much of the outside world is much more open to AI and using it and seeing benefits. And so it worries me of where we're going to wind up in the publishing world and in the writing world, because, it's not the same as going from handwritten scroll to typewriter to computer. It's not just a tool, because a lot of people say, why isn't it just a tool? And it's not just a tool. It's a lot more than that, especially if you understand some of the copyright infringement cases that are up now against AI companies. Right now it's alleged that one of the companies, who I won't mention, people probably know, who, if you're a writer, scraped a database of pirated books to train its large language model. So that's basically meaning it took a lot of books for free, didn't pay for them, didn't compensate the authors, didn't get permission, and used it to train its large language model. So the reason why it's gotten good enough that when I said I put in this and asked it to write a first chapter, and it wasn't the worst thing I've ever read, is because it's kind of doing it off the backs of other authors, so to speak. So it's able to do it because you and I wrote books that I'm sure were included in it.
Totally included. Yep. My writing was used to teach this.
Yeah. So, it leaves you in a place of I said this the other night, it's not so much what we can do with the technology, but it's what we should do. They're more moral, ethical issues right now, because you can't put the genie back in the bottle. It's there. So will writers use it? Will they disclose it? Will publishers make them disclose it? Will readers want to read it if they know? Will we eventually have an AI generated shelf in the bookstore and a human author shelf? I don't know. I could see any of it happening. Unfortunately, I really could see us getting there.
Oh my goodness, that is scary. Robot books, the rom-com robot section. I know it's not robots, but it is. Did you read the piece? Curtis Sittenfeld wrote a short story and asked AI to write a short story. She fed them the character and the basic plot and whatever, and then both were published in the Times side by side without names, and you had to figure out which one was Curtis's. I right away knew which one was Sittenfeld, and I like to think it's because I'm smarter than the computer, because I have read everything she's written and I'm a big fan. But I did notice a difference in style, voice, insight, emotional connection, or whatever it was. But yeah, it's scary. And I have, nothing more to offer than to say, reading a book like yours helps also get people to think about it and sparks a conversation. And, I can really see a book club enjoying talking about this and digging in going places that they hadn't thought, because it's not just about the people in the book or the world, but the future of art and what might, what could happen in an unchecked society.
Yeah. And that's what I was really hoping to do. I wanted to spark conversation, and I tried to write the book in a way to kind of present both sides and not be preachy. I wanted people to think about the issues involved that both sides are going to present and make their own conclusions. And as you said, bring it to your book club and talk about it together. Because I think that's the stage we're at now, because as I said, the technology is there, it's going to keep getting better. So we need to be having these conversations probably 2 years ago, but I feel like now is when we're really starting to have them.
Right. And it is sort of what the question that was just posed was what is considered art? Who decides? Who gets to say? It was Jenna's question or comment. Yeah. It makes me think of Banksy. When I was reading it, I was thinking about artists who break the boundary of what is considered, art, beauty, ideas, and who's allowed to, who can make money off of what kind of an idea. It's really fascinating. I want to open it up to questions from the audience because we are at the right time for this. And Randy, also, I saw your comment about using like, you know, a program to spell check or to use Grammarly, you mentioned. And I feel like, yeah, that's okay. You know, we're not going to say what's okay or what you're allowed to do. But yeah, it does feel like the next thing we're creating, instead of putting in your content to get feedback, but actually using it to create content is something different. Okay, will you be doing any events in New York? I still get starstruck and love having signed books. I read and listen simultaneously. Oh, interesting. So I'll be giving you 2 sales and sell. Oh, this Randy.
Oh, Randy, you're the best. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, I don't have anything on the books right now in New York. I'm doing some things in the Boston area. I will be in Providence at the end of this month, and I will be in Orlando and South Carolina next week, and in Pittsburgh, but kind of haven't hit New York yet. But who knows? Maybe actually in the fall I might make it down to New York to do something. But thank you very much. And if you haven't started yet, people tell me, and I've listened to a little bit, the audiobook, people love the narrator. So that's a good thing. So hopefully you'll enjoy listening.
Oh, that's great. And I did just see that you're going to be at Booked in Providence. So I'm going to come. I actually know all 4 of you. It's you, Annie Hartnett, Kate Woodworth, and maybe somebody else.
Yes, one other author whose name escapes me right now. But
okay. I'm going to look that up and I'll mention that person too, because I was like, I have read all these books or no.
Oh, that's great.
So that's the closest, Randy. You can take the Amtrak and come hang out with us in Providence.
Yes.
And any other questions from Jenna posting? Okay, since this is an industry book, dishing publishing, what kind of feedback have you gotten from other authors and industry people? Great question.
So a couple of the authors I was saying that are my close friends that we debuted with, who hadn't read it before it was published, just said, like, I recognize all of our experiences together in this book. So they really feel like it's true, not only to the author experience, but to the personal experience that we've had. If people know me well, they can see places, names change, people change. But every anecdote in the book is true. And people are surprised about that. Readers are surprised about that. Not industry people are not, but readers are surprised to learn that, yes, publishers pay to have a book at the front of the bookstore. Readers don't know that. Authors do. Industry people know that. But every anecdote is true. So the people who I know who are close to me have felt seen by what goes on in the book. And so, we're just early days. So I'm curious what's going to happen. Readers who don't know as much, but who are, either trying to be writers, are kind of learning a lot. They said they feel like it's they're learning the business of publishing by reading the book.
Right. I had that in my notes too, about the idea of they know what's going to be a bestseller because they make it a bestseller.
Exactly.
They pay more for it and put the dollars behind where it is in the store and how much publicity it gets and where the author's, speaking or and push it in those first weeks to get them on the list. So although it's surprising, it's inevitable, perhaps.
Very nice. Yeah, I like that.
I had to use it. And I looked up the book. Actually, the 4th author, Nini Burnt, I don't know. There are reasons for this novel. So it sounds like there's also maybe a literary nod in that book too. So that's at Booked in Providence on May 27th. So if you're local to me, come see Lori there. Okay, other questions? How has the publishing process for romantic fiction been treating you?
So these are the tricky things to answer because they're like, how honest do I be about it? But so I will say the working with my editor and working with HarperCollins and working with the team has been a fantastic experience. And I will say an elevated experience from my other experiences in terms of working with publicists, working with my editor. I have a new agent for this book as well, which has been a new experience. So it's our first time together. My previous agent was extremely supportive as well, but we're finding our groove with my new agent as we kind of go through this process together and kind of as a team. But I will say it's been a very good process behind the scenes. When you get down to what Julie's just talking about like sales and marketing support, and is it where you want? Probably every author, even at the top of the level, is going to say they still want more. So you always want more. But I will find they're very receptive to all the things I bring them. And Sophie says in the book, she's a better hustler than she is a writer. And I hope I'm as good at both, but that comes from my own experience. I put myself out there to, market my books, and I'm there. I got myself on the local news covered my launch event. And I was on another local news station and and I was on NPR Here and Now. And it's a lot of the efforts that I'm doing myself to get myself out there, and in tandem with the sales and marketing people at HarperCollins. But I push and I hustle. And so I'm used to that. I do it. There was a couple things I was doing, and my editor said, listen, I know you're doing this, and I know, we love that you're so active behind the scenes, but she said, this is why you're at HarperCollins. We'll take care of that. And I said, that's good. And that's not necessarily an experience I've had before at other major publishers. So so it is a good experience thus far.
Cool. And Tori Whitaker had to go, but she said she just loved the title. So that's going to give me one more reason to hold up the book one last time. And by the way, I do just also want to say that I realized I had a sweater that totally matched it. So I went upstairs like quickly right before this, and I was like, oh, I got to put that on because any chance I can get to.
I have to go get some more pink or orange clothing. I don't have it.
Right. Yeah, I know. It's like, are you going to change your whole wardrobe for the book? Yeah, you got something like this, you better.
Yeah, that's excellent. I want to steal that.
Yeah, I might send it to you. I can bring it to the Booked Author Series. Take it on tour. And so I have one question for you, which is, what is next?
Okay, yes. So my next book is also with HarperCollins, and it will be under their Park Row imprint. This is under Mira, but we're moving to Park Row. Our editor, Julie, is as well. I guess I can reveal that. And it is the same vein of book club fiction. It tackles a lot of the same topics as romantic fiction in terms of female friendship and ambitious women and how you balance career and life. But it adds like a little bit of a speculative element. So it is called Kiss, Marry, Kill, and it will come out next April. And it's about 3 best friends and founders of a health and wellness app that play the conversational game Kiss, Marry, Kill at their summer outing, but they spin the rules. If people know the game, it's usually like 3 celebrities, 3 people you went to college with, and you ask one person, who would you kiss, who would you marry, and who would you kill? They spin the game. So like which Ryan Reynolds, Ryan Gosling, Ryan Seacrest.
All the Ryans.
All the Ryans.
Any Ryan.
But they spin the game. So they say, 1, who would you marry? Who would you kill? Who would you kiss? And they wake up the next morning in an alternate universe, having each done the thing that they said.
Great. Love it. Super excited for that. And so you said next April. So you're busy. You got a busy year ahead. Yeah, and it sounds so much fun. So we'll see you back here next year for that one. And in the meantime, everybody, we're holding it up one more time. Romantic Fiction by Laurie Gold. Get it, read it, enjoy it, and talk about it, because there's so much good stuff here. And also, it sounds like if you can get to a romantasy conference, like go to one. Because
yes, please.
It's really fun. Okay. Anything else from our producer? No, we are all set. So we're going to say goodbye. Thank you for joining us on A Mighty Blaze, and we will see you again next time. And please tune in wherever you can, YouTube or Facebook Live, and have a great afternoon, everybody.